At 7:12 on a grey Tuesday morning, the first flatbed rolled past the HOA entrance and turned straight toward the abandoned church they had ignored for years. By the time the second truck pulled in, the board president was already standing on the sidewalk in her robe, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, staring like she had just watched a ghost unlock the front gates. 3 weeks earlier, she had laughed when I signed the closing papers. She told 2 neighbors that buying that crumbling old church was the dumbest investment anyone had made in this county. According to her, the roof leaked, the lot was worthless, and the place would sit empty until it collapsed into a pile of rotten wood and bad memories. But that morning, the gravel was fresh, the survey stakes were in, and a row of bright orange markers cut across the side yard like a countdown timer. Then she saw the temporary sign near the road. Private commercial parking, authorized truck access only. That was the exact moment her face changed. Because she finally understood I had not bought a dead building beside the HOA. I had bought the one piece of land they could see every single day, but could no longer control. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Behind HOA Stories and comment your state below. Most people in this county saw that church as an eyesore with a steeple. I saw a location everyone else had gotten too lazy to understand. It sat on a narrow piece of land right beside the HOA entrance, close enough that every resident passed it, but just outside the neighborhood boundary where their rules stopped having real power. That detail mattered more than the broken windows, the sagging gutters, or the faded white paint peeling off the clapboard walls. The building had been empty for nearly 8 years. Before that, a small congregation used it for Sunday services, potlucks, and the occasional charity drive. But once attendance dropped and repairs got expensive, the place was abandoned and slowly became part of the background. Weeds climbed the side fence. The parking area cracked open. Half the town forgot it even had an owner. The HOA loved that. An empty church next door meant silence, no traffic, and no questions about who really controlled that corner. They treated it like a dead buffer zone, something that existed for their benefit without them ever paying for it. What they never understood was simple. A neglected property next to a controlling HOA is not worthless. In the right hands, it becomes leverage. And the day I noticed where that church sat, I stopped seeing a ruin and started seeing the most strategic lot in the county. My name's Caleb Mercer, and by the time I bought that church, the HO already knew exactly who I was. I ran a small freight support business on the edge of town. Nothing flashy. 2 service trucks, a yard lease, short-term trailer storage, and a steady stream of owner-operators who needed a safe place to park between loads. Most of my work was practical, local, and boring to anyone who didn't understand trucking. But boring businesses keep counties alive. They move lumber, feed, roofing, fencing, fuel, and everything else people pretend arrives by magic. The HOA hated that kind of reality. To them, I was not a businessman. I was the truck guy. The one they blamed whenever they heard diesel brakes on the highway or saw mud on a shoulder after rain. Never mind that my property sat outside their boundary. Never mind that my drivers followed county rules better than half the residents complaining about them. In their minds, I represented the exact future they did not want near their entrance. Work, noise, utility, and people who earned with their hands instead of policing other people's mailboxes. We had crossed paths before. A few years earlier, one board member tried pressuring the county to block access improvements near my yard, claiming it would damage neighborhood character. Another sent me a letter about commercial overflow parking that wasn't even on my land. So when I started asking quiet questions about the abandoned church, word got around fast. And once the HOA heard my name attached to that property, they stopped seeing a ruin. They started seeing a threat. The truth is, I did not stumble onto that deal by accident. I had been watching that property for almost 6 months, not every day, but enough to notice the patterns that mattered. No maintenance crew. No church activity. No contractor bids posted. No for sale sign either, which told me something even more useful. Whoever still owned it was disconnected, overwhelmed, or waiting for someone serious to ask the right question. So I started asking. Not loudly. Not through gossip. I checked county records, traced the title, and found out the church was still tied to a small religious trust that had basically gone dormant after the congregation dissolved. A local attorney was handling the loose ends. Taxes were current. but barely. Insurance was minimal. The building was not loved anymore. It was simply being carried. That is the kind of property most people avoid. It is also the kind of property a patient buyer can close before dreamers, flippers, and busybodies even realize a door has opened. I made one clean offer. No speeches. No dramatic vision board. No request for owner financing. Just a number, proof of funds, and a short inspection window because I already understood the real value was not in the pews, the roof, or the stained glass. It was in the lot, the access, and the location beside the HOA's front gate. 3 weeks later, the papers were signed. And I kept my mouth shut. The first letter showed up less than 48 hours after closing. It was not from a lawyer, not from the county, and not from anyone with actual authority over my land. It came from the HOA board president on heavy cream paper, like that alone was supposed to make it official. The message was polite in tone and arrogant in every other way. She welcomed me to the area, said the neighborhood valued beauty, peace, and continuity, and strongly advised me to preserve the church in a manner consistent with community expectations. Community expectations. That phrase told me everything. I had bought a property outside their boundary, outside their dues, and outside their rules, but she still wrote that letter as if I had just entered her kingdom and needed orientation. 2 days later, she came in person. She brought another board member, both of them smiling the kind of smile people wear when they think civility can hide a threat. They asked what my plans were. I told them I was still evaluating options. That was true, just not in the way they hoped. Then she said the neighborhood would be very concerned if the site attracted commercial activity, traffic, or anything that harmed nearby property values. I asked her one simple question. Are you speaking for the county, or just for yourself? That landed harder than any speech could have. Because the truth was obvious, even if she did not want to admit it. The sale was done. The deed was recorded. And for the first time, the HOA was standing next to a property they could complain about all day without controlling for a single minute. What the HOA never understood was that I did not buy that church to restore it, flip it, or turn it into some charming little event venue with string lights and reclaimed wood signs. I bought it because the lot solved a problem my business had been dealing with for years. Safe truck parking is hard to find around this county. Drivers need somewhere legal, visible, and close to the highway where they can stage equipment, park overnight between jobs, or leave work rigs without worrying about theft, fines, or residents calling in complaints just because a vehicle looks too industrial for their taste. That church lot had direct road access, enough width for rework, and just enough separation from the HOA line to make their opinions irrelevant. So my plan was simple. Not glamorous. Not emotional. Just profitable. Clean up the entrance. Bring in gravel. Mark off spaces. Add lighting, fencing, and a coded gate later. Keep the old building standing for now, but make the land start earning immediately. I was not trying to create chaos. I was turning a dead property into working ground. That is what bothered them most. If I had bought the church and let it sit, they would have loved it. If I had poured money into making it pretty, they would have bragged about the neighborhood improving. But the second that property became useful in a way they could not control, their concerns stopped being about beauty. It became about power. Once the HOA realized I was serious, they stopped pretending this was a friendly neighborhood concern and started attacking from every angle they could find. First came the phone calls to county planning. They argued the property would create noise, visual blight, drainage problems, safety hazards, and commercial disruption for nearby families. Then they switched tactics and started calling it environmental risk, as if a gravel lot for parked work trucks was somehow more dangerous than the abandoned structure sitting there for 8 years with broken access and no upkeep. When that did not stop anything, they moved to public pressure. An emergency HOA meeting was announced. Residents were told the church property was about to become a threat to property values and traffic safety. A petition started circulating. Neighbors who had never spoken to me suddenly had opinions about diesel engines, late-night headlights, and the kind of people truck parking might attract. That phrase told me all I needed to know. This was never really about land use. It was about class, image, and control. Then came the code complaints. My entrance cleanup was reported. Gravel delivery was reported. Stakes from the surveyor were reported. Even a portable dumpster got reported, as if cleaning an abandoned lot was suspicious activity. One board member drove by slow enough to take photos from the shoulder. Another emailed the county asking whether my purchase agreement had disclosed intended use, which was both none of their business and already irrelevant because I owned the property outright. But the most desperate move came a week later. The board president tried telling people I could not possibly use the church land for truck parking because religious property had permanent restrictions. She said it confidently, publicly, and more than once. That was a mistake. Because by the time she started spreading that claim, I had already done the one thing she had not. I had stopped listening to rumor, stopped reacting to pressure, and started reading the actual land file. The county file answered the question in less than 10 minutes. The church property was not trapped under some permanent religious use restriction, and it definitely was not under HOA influence. Years earlier, the parcel had been classified under a flexible local use category tied to road frontage and independent access, not neighborhood preference. In plain English, that meant the land could be repurposed if the actual county requirements were met. The board president had built her whole public argument on a rule that did not exist. That would have been satisfying enough on its own. But the better discovery was buried in an older planning note attached to the parcel history. Because the lot sat on a commercial access corridor near the highway, the county had long treated it as a transitional property, something between residential sensitivity and working road utility. That one detail changed the entire fight. The HOA wanted everyone to believe the church lot was spiritually frozen in time. The county saw it as land. Usable land. I called planning myself, confirmed the requirements, and asked every question the HOA hoped I would be too careless to ask. Surface prep, drainage, entry width, site distance, occupancy limits. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. By the end of that call, I knew two things. First, my plan was legal if I built it correctly. Second, the HOA had spent days trying to stop a project they never bothered to understand. I did not announce the opening. I did not argue with the HOA, mail out a rebuttal, or stand on the edge of the lot waiting for someone to challenge me. I just moved forward the way working people usually do when they know they are right and the paperwork is already done. First came the gravel. Then the grading crew leveled the old cracked parking area and widened the usable section near the side lane. After that, temporary markers went in, the entrance got cleaned up, and a basic access sign was posted near the road. Nothing flashy. No giant banner. No speech. Just enough visible change for anyone driving past to realize the abandoned church was no longer abandoned. By sunrise the next Tuesday, the first trucks arrived. A flatbed backed into the far side. Then a box truck took the second marked space. Then a local roofing contractor parked 2 work pickups near the fence line because he had been waiting months for legal overflow space closer to the highway. Within an hour, the lot looked exactly the way I had planned it, orderly, useful, and very real. That was when the HOA president appeared. She stood across from the entrance in house slippers, staring at the sign like maybe if she read it twice, it would change. Another board member pulled up behind her. Then 2 residents stopped on the sidewalk. No one was smiling now. The same people who had called the property worthless were suddenly watching every truck that rolled in like each one was a personal insult. What really bothered them was not the noise. It was the proof. They had spent weeks acting like my plan was impossible, reckless, or illegal. But there it was in plain sight, striped space, controlled access, paying vehicles, and a dead property earning money before most people had finished breakfast. That morning, the church stopped being their favorite empty view. It became my busiest lot. The meltdown did not happen on my lot. It happened that Thursday night at the HOA clubhouse, when the board called a special meeting and finally had to explain why the abandoned church next door was now a functioning commercial parking site they could neither fine, block, nor shame out of existence. I heard about it from 2 residents before the meeting even ended. Voices were raised. Someone accused the board of failing to protect the entrance. Another demanded to know why they told everyone the project was impossible if the county had already confirmed it was lawful. That was the part that hurt them most. Not that I won. That they had spoken with confidence, stirred up panic, and still ended up powerless in public. A week later, the complaints slowed. 2 weeks later, they stopped entirely. The trucks kept coming. The lot stayed organized. The sky did not fall. Property values did not collapse. Life moved on, except now every resident driving past that old church saw the same reminder. Control is not ownership. You can hold meetings, write letters, invent pressure, and act like a gate gives you authority over everything around it. But land does not care about ego. Records matter. Boundaries matter. And when people mistake influence for power, reality has a way of correcting them.